Happen Pharmaceuticals in association with Higher Secondary Principals Forum.
Yes, very welcome to you all, and I'm here before you to present on the topic that is kings, farmers and towns, that is the early states and economies 600 BCE to 600 CE. Okay, so as this lesson is dealing with the kings, farmers and towns, that is 600 BCE to 600 CE. Remember my dear friends, this topic when we deal about okay, when we say, okay, we have seen the states, we know there are different states at present, and we are aware of these all metropolitan cities and various states which are there in India. But remember, when we talk about these things, even in ancient period of time, that is immediately after this decline of Harappan civilization, which you may have learnt earlier in the first lesson, after the decline of Harappan civilization, around 1500 years, there was not much reference to the ancient history. But remember, it was in 6th century BC, it was said that it was a turning point in Indian history. Ancient Indian history was revealed, it was revealed to the world. My dear friends, these cities and states now which we see, I feel these are not at all that much in a vast expansion as compared to the ancient cities. Ancient cities incorporated not only one state which we see now, but remember, earlier ancient states were the amalgamation of around 2-3 states together. Just imagine how these kings may have ruled over such a vast cities and vast states. Yes, this is what we are going to learn in this lesson, that is kings, farmers and towns, early economies. When we are talking about early economies, remember my friends, it is early economies when we are talking about there was an expansion of coins. Coins were used, currency was used by the people in ancient period of time. Not only that we are using currency, we are using digital economy, no doubt now, but remember these coins were used by the people earlier in ancient period of time. So these economy, then how this economy could prosper because of these coins, and what type of metal was used for the coins? It was copper, it was even gold coins. Just imagine people in ancient period of time for day-to-day transaction, what they were making use of? Obviously they were making use of gold coins, which we hardly can make use of. So even remember in this lesson what are we going to deal is, we are going to deal about the Mahajanapadas. Now what is Mahajanapadas? Mahajanapadas were the biggest cities, biggest states, and altogether there were around 16 Mahajanapadas. Total 16 Mahajanapadas, the bigger and the bigger cities and the states. As I have said, not only one state of today, if we take into consideration, remember there was an amalgamation, combination of 2-3 states together. For example, I will give you the example of Magadha. Magadha was such a Mahajanapada, the most powerful Mahajanapada. Among these 16 Mahajanapadas was Magadha. And remember friends, Magadha, if we see in today's situation, present day scenario of Indian states, Magadha was a part of the present day Orissa, present day Bihar, and even the parts of West Bengal. Even some regions of Nepal was also included in Magadha. So that was the vastness of this Mahajanapada, that was Magadha. So there were total 16 Mahajanapadas. We are going to learn in detail how it developed, how it emerged, who were the rulers who were ruling over these Mahajanapadas, which were those other 16 Mahajanapadas. So these were the cities and the states of the ancient period of time. The coins which I have said is, even Kushanas and many rulers, they had issued, even Gupta rulers had issued these gold coins, and for day-to-day transaction, people were making use of the gold coins. No doubt, why this expansion could take place? This expansion was possible because of the use of iron, and iron was found in abundance in the iron mines which were located in the regions of Magadha. Magadha is present day in Bihar. Even as iron mines were in abundance, iron was basically used for agricultural activities, iron was used for producing of different tools, and those tools were used for preparing weapons, okay, as well as this iron was used for preparing not only weapons but also these tools which were used in agricultural activities. So due to the agricultural activities, what happened? There was a lot of expansion. much more development. People settled. Earlier people, those who were pastoralists, just they were like nomads moving from one place to another, so to say. But they settled down in these regions, in these cities. That's why it is Mahajanapadas. So agriculture prospered. Then even here we are referring to the inscriptions. Okay, inscriptions, remember, when this prosperity was seen in Indian scenario, there was even how these things were recorded. These things were recorded in form of inscriptions. Scribes were appointed to write on the stones. Just imagine, just think of it, my dear students. Just imagine people were appointed to write on the stones. Here sometimes it becomes very difficult for us even to type some this key on the laptop. It becomes very difficult for us to write and do some literature work. Even it becomes very difficult for us even to write on a notebook and go ahead and go learning, writing, doing this work. But imagine when it is so easy for us to write on the paper, even type on the laptop, but just think of those scribes, think of those people who had recorded such a vastness of this Indian scenario, the ancient glory. It was recorded in form of the inscriptions. Inscriptions which were written on the stones, the stone pillars, the stone rock surfaces. I'll show you the pictures further, like how these inscriptions were engraved on the stones and on the rocks. So these texts, even text, remember, when you're talking about text, there is a reference to Arthashastra. As we know that you as a students, you must be learning economics. But the base of economics in ancient period of time, it was Arthashastra, which was written by Kautilya. Okay, so that very, very valuable text, even Vedas, basically Rig Veda. Then such other texts like Panchatantra, you may have read such stories in your childhood, Panchatantra stories, which gives a lot of moral boost, so to say. And these stories are loaded with the moral stories and moral ideas and ideologies. So these Panchatantra books, these Jataka tales, okay, which reveals the life of Buddha. Jataka tales, Panchatantra, Arthashastra, Megasthenes Indica. So all these texts were also written, and it was a very great literature source in the ancient period of time. Even we are referring to this, in this lesson we will be dealing like how these two religions, that is Buddhism and Jainism, also have given rise to this development and the changes which came in society. That is about Buddhism and Jainism. Then at last I am referring to these two terms. It is one name is Prinsep and one term it is Piyadasi. Remember Prinsep, he was James Prinsep, who was a officer of East India Company who came to India, and it is said that he was the one who was much more interested, and he gave keen interest in deciphering the earliest scripts of India. Remember, earliest scripts which we may not be aware of these scripts, which we won't be able to decipher it. Okay, such scripts like Brahmi and Kharoshti. So he was James Prinsep. He deciphered this script, that is Brahmi and Kharoshti, and he was the one, when he deciphered. What is deciphering? Giving meaning to it. So when he read this inscription, he gave meaning to it. So he deciphered it. And that Brahmi Kharoshti script, after deciphering it, it has revealed a lot about ancient history and the depth and the glory of ancient period of time, and basically revealing a lot about Mahajanapadas. And he has also given a meaning to this word, that is Piyadasi. Piyadasi means pleasant to behold. And basically this title was given to Emperor Ashoka. Even Devanam Priya, even that was another title which was given to Ashoka. So these scripts which were written in Brahmi, then the Prakrit, all these, then the Prakrit language, Kharoshti scripts, these are revealed by Prinsep. That's why we are referring to Prinsep and Piyadasi. So these are the things which we are going to learn in detail in this lesson, that is farmers, kings, farmers and towns. Okay, dealing with the question, before the question I'll just let you know about these 16 Mahajanapadas here, where Kamboja, Gandhara, Kuru, Shurasena, Matsya, Avanti, Chaitya, Vatsa, Panchala, Koshala, Malla, Vrichi, also called as Vajji, Kashi. Here we are talking about the most powerful Mahajanapada, that is Magadha. Anga and Asaka. So these were the main 16 Mahajanapadas of 600 BCE to 600 CE. So first question, here I have done this PPT for this so that it will help you very well to even locate the question and the points which are based on this, the question, main points related to the question. First question is, why 6th century BC is regarded as the turning point in early Indian history? Remember, as I have told you earlier, like in this lesson, we are revealing the glory of the ancient period of time. So it is the 6th century BCE that was called as a turning point. Why? Because it is an era associated with early states and cities. Growing use of iron led to the development of coinage. It led to the growth of Buddhism and Jainism. There is a reference to 16 states as Mahajanapadas, which I had shown you in earlier slide. The list of Mahajanapadas include Vajji, Magad, Koshala, Kuru, Panchala, Gandhara and Avanti. And the main were, the most powerful was Magad. Okay, these are the coins, Panchmark coins, which were used at that period of time. As we know, this Buddhism and Jainism propagated by Lord Mahavir and Gautam Buddha. Next question, how were Mahajanapadas ruled? So who were the rulers who ruled over these Mahajanapadas? Here that picture which depicts, it's related to the Dharma Sutras, okay, Dharma Sutras. I'll come to this point, Dharma Sutras. Mahajanapadas were ruled by the kings known as Ganas and Sanghas, that is oligarchies. Even Vardhaman Mahavir and Gautam Buddha, they were belonging to Gana and Sangha. Power was shared by the number of men called as Rajas. Early Mahajanapadas had a fortified capital city. Brahmanas composed Sanskrit text known as Dharma Sutras, and it laid down the norms for the rulers and advised to collect taxes from traders and artisans. So here kings were ruling, but how, in what form? It was in form of Ganas and Sanghas. And Dharma Sutras, I mean details were written in a text called as Dharma Sutra, and in Dharma Sutra the rules and regulations were laid down to the kings how to rule, whether to collect taxes or whether to collect taxes from the peasants, from the artisans, from the merchants. So that was also details were given in Dharma Sutras. Similarly, there was also fortified city of these Mahajanapadas. Okay. So Janapadas and Mahajanapadas were fortified so that other Mahajanapadas should not attack those regions. That's why fortification of the Mahajanapada was something which was a main feature of Mahajanapada. Okay, so that is about how were Mahajanapadas ruled. Next question is how Magadha became the most powerful Mahajanapadas. Remember, how is it that Magad became such a powerful Mahajanapadas among all these 16 Mahajanapadas? First and foremost reason, remember, it was agriculture which was most productive in Magad. And this agriculture became most productive in Magad because of iron mines, which I have said earlier in introduction. It was because of the iron mines. Iron mines were in abundance in Magad region, that is in present-day Bihar. And they could extract iron very easily for the production of these different tools which were also used for the agriculture purpose. Okay, and that is the main reason, and as well as tools were, this iron was used for preparation of weapons too. That is how these iron mines provided resources for making tools and weapons. That is another very important point which made Magad the most powerful Mahajanapada. Elephants were important component in the army and were found in the forest of Magad. So obviously at that period of time, no doubt these animals were used in army. And elephants, as there were thick forest in the region of Magad, the animals were brought, basically elephants were brought, and it was used in the army by the rulers of Magad. Ganga and its tributaries provided means of cheap communication. Here if you can just minutely observe, Ganga flows from this region and it crosses the region of Magad. Okay, this Ganga and its tributaries. So this Ganga and its tributaries provided the best means of communication for the people of Magad. They could transport their goods, whatever they wanted to transport, they could transport through the riverine route, which was much more easy for them to transport, and it was easy as well as it was very cheap, And no doubt even the Ganga and its tributaries, their water was used by these people for the irrigation purpose too. And that is another reason why Magad became the most powerful Mahajanapada. Next is its Buddhist and Jaina writers, they attributed its power to the policies of ambitious kings like Bimbisara, Mahapadmananda and their ministers. So before Chandragupta Maurya, when we go and learn about the part before Chandragupta Maurya, remember even there were the famous kings like Bimbisar, Mahapadmananda, and after Mahapadmananda it was Chandragupta Maurya, okay, who later founded Mauryan dynasty. So these kings also have done a lot of contribution for the development, had done a lot of contribution, and that is how they could also contribute for the upliftment and the development of this Magad region. So these are the most important points which are highlighted over here. One is agriculture, iron mines, elephants, Ganga and its tributaries and the different kings. So all these factors were responsible to make Magad the most powerful Mahajanapada among all these 16 Mahajanapadas. Next question. What are the different resources available for the reconstruction of Mauryan history? First and foremost, remember, it includes archaeological finds, especially sculpture and the account of Megasthenes. When you're talking about these archaeological finds and the sculptures of Megasthenes and the accounts of Megasthenes, remember, when we're talking about Megasthenes, question arises, who was Megasthenes? Megasthenes was a Greek ambassador who came in India and who remained in the court of Chandragupta Maurya. And King Megasthenes, ambassador Megasthenes was sent by Seleucus and he was sent to India, and Megasthenes remained as an ambassador in the court of Chandragupta Maurya. When he remained in India, he was a Greek personality, just remember, he was from Greece. But when he remained in India, he learnt in detail, he observed what was happening in the Mauryan administration, how the kings were ruling, what were the different committees, how they were trying to administer such a vast region. So he had noted down in his book, Megasthenes' book, and the name of the book was Indica. And in Indica, he has given a very detailed description of how the rule was carried out by Mauryan dynasty. So his account, that is Indica, serves as the best important source to learn about Mauryan region, Mauryan dynasty, Magad region. So as well as different archaeological finds, as I have told you all about these stone inscriptions, stone pillars, even the sculptures, various statues, all this serves as a very important source to learn about Mauryan history. Arthashastra, as I mentioned earlier, Arthashastra is today's, we will say, modern economics, and ancient period of time it is a base of economics, it was Arthashastra, and Arthashastra was written by Kautilya, other name was Chanakya. And he was a person who was responsible actually to settle for the flourishment of this Mauryan dynasty. Mauryas were mentioned in the Buddhist, Jaina and Puranic as well as in Sanskrit literature. That's why we get a lot of information about these Mauryas. From where? From the Buddhist, Chinese and their literature. Inscriptions of Ashoka, which were inscribed on the rocks and the pillars, are regarded as the most valuable source. Ashoka inscribed his messages to his subjects and officials on the stone surfaces. Remember, Ashoka is to give the messages to his people. How he could give the messages to his people? If now we see, we have a lot of facilities are available, digital world wherein we can pass our message to everyone anywhere. But imagine when we are talking about ancient period of time, how these people, how these king may have passed their messages. How this king may have passed their messages to their subjects, and this was done with the stone and the rock edicts, even on the natural rocks and also on the rock pillars. So messages were inscribed, written on the stone pillars. What was the political structure of Mauryan Empire? Like when we have said, okay, this Megasthenes has mentioned about this administration, even Kautilya has written a lot about administration, about economy. So what is referred in that, and even how do we get even information from the rock edicts? There were 5 major political centers of the Magad Empire, and earlier capital of Magad was Rajgaha, and Rajgaha is present day Rajgir, which is there in Patna. Rajgaha means a house of the kings. That is a Prakrit and all these ancient languages which we are not using now, Prakrit, Pali, okay, these are the known languages. So these language, in those languages these things were written, and remember it was a capital was Rajgaha. Then from Rajgaha the capital of Magadha was shifted to Patliputra, and Patliputra is present day Patna, which is in Bihar. Okay. So capital was Rajgaha and then shifted to Patliputra, and the provincial centers were Takshila. So here you can make out this Magadha. Okay, as I said earlier, now present day if we take into consideration, present day it's a part of Orissa, it's a part of West Bengal, it's a part of Bihar, it's a part of, see, just imagine such a vast empire. Okay, and the main political centers were, first was Patliputra, 5 political centers. One is Patliputra, Takshila, Ujjaini, Toshali and Suvarnagiri. When we are talking about Suvarnagiri, Suvarnagiri obviously it's in part of Karnataka. Okay, such a vastness, I mean even Magad is to have their trade links to different regions of here, Takshila this region, then Toshali, even Suvarnagiri. So these were the 5 political centers of Magad. Suvarnagiri was important for tapping gold mines in Karnataka, and why it was famous for? Suvarnagiri was famous for tapping gold, and there were gold mines in Karnataka. The next question, it deals, it's very important as I have said earlier, like Megasthenes, what information does he provide about the Mauryan administration? As he had come from Greece, he remained in the court of Chandragupta Maurya, remember, as he was ambassador. In his book Indica, he has referred to these committees, very important. Just imagine such a vast empire. Question arises, how it was ruled by these kings? What information did Megasthenes provide about the military activities of the Mauryans? So first and foremost point, remember, Megasthenes mentioned a committee with 6 subcommittees for coordinating military activities. Megasthenes was ambassador, as I have said, he was ambassador in the court of Chandragupta Maurya. He has referred about these 6 committees and subcommittees, and these were the committees which were carrying out their work, and that is why we can say that yes, it was Magad which became very powerful. Maybe these committees which were appointed by the kings, they worked so well and they did and performed their duties so well with the integrity, and that is the reason why these committees and their work could make and take Magad to a great glory. And obviously one committee which was appointed, it was just appointed and it had to do exclusive work of looking after navy. So one committee only looked after navy, provision of the ships, how to build ships, whether to build ships and whatever kind of the ships they were needed. So what type of wood to be brought and how to be brought and who to be employed to build such ships, and all such naval activities may have been carried out by that particular committee, that is called as the Committee for Navy. Second committee managed transport. Okay, one committee navy, second committee it looked only for transport. The third committee was responsible for foot soldiers. So how many foot soldiers to be appointed, how many to be employed, how many to be promoted. Okay, all that work and the task was carried out by this third committee which was appointed to look after foot soldiers, okay, which we also say infantry, okay, foot soldiers. Fourth committee was only made to look after the horses. As I have said, Magad became powerful, no doubt it had really great military strength, and how that military strength was possible at early period of time, remember ancient period of time, obviously they were making use of these animals, especially elephants, horses, and they were in need of horses too. So this particular committee, fourth committee, they exclusively looked after the horses, supply of horses, bringing different type of horses from different regions. It was not abundantly used, available in India. They were getting from different regions. So how many to be brought? So from where to be brought? So that work was done by this committee which was looking after only horses. The fifth committee was only appointed for the chariots. Now what is chariots? Chariots, as you may have seen in different serials which are depicting about, like for example, epic which depicts epics of India, for example Mahabharata, Ramayana, you may have seen the chariots, Rath. Okay, so these kings and these senapatis and all, they just sit in this Rath, that is chariot, and they go on the forefront for the warfare. So building or making of these chariots, so even that work was given for a particular committee, and that committee was doing that work. Not other work was done by those people. So those officials were exclusively appointed to that particular task. And I could say because of these committees, obviously the military strength was much more powerful of Magad. So fifth was for chariots and the sixth for the elephants. So this sixth committee looked only for the elephants, looked after the elephants, the bringing of the elephants, all that work was carried out. So these 6 committees play a very important role, remember, and these 6 committees are systematically mentioned in the book written by Megasthenes, and that is Indica. The activity, even there was committees as well as subcommittees, and the subcommittee's activity was for arranging of bullock carts to carry equipments, procuring food for the soldiers and fodder for animals, recruiting servants and artisans to look after the soldiers. Obviously, when the soldiers are on the forefront of this warfare and all, obviously they are in need of, they are in, or they may have been in need of the food and fodder, food for the soldiers, fodder for animals. Obviously, without that they would have not survived. So what this committee did, this subcommittee, they provided food and fodder. So this is how the committees were assigned a particular work, and that is how they manage with their military activities. Here this sculpture indicates how this they have depicted over here the chariots, okay, even the horses you can see very well, even the elephants which are shown over here. So it means obviously these things were used, and this is a very nice sculpture. So remember, even the sculptures also serve as one of the most important source to learn about history, ancient history. The question is, what efforts were taken by Ashoka, the great emperor Ashoka? Remember, as I have said, after Chandragupta Maurya, he was Emperor Ashoka who had taken Indian history to a great glory. And what efforts were taken by Ashoka to spread Buddhism? Even he was the one who propagated Buddhism. And he was the one, Ashoka, he just a kind of a picture which is depicted over here. Even we are very much aware of this Ashoka Stamba, okay. So he was the one who appointed Dhamma Mahamattas to propagate the teachings of Buddhism. And Dhamma Mahamattas were the officers who were propagating what is actually the base of Buddhism. And remember, he was not actually dealing with the religion called as Buddhism, but he was propagating Dhamma. Many times the question arises, what is Dhamma? Dhamma is nothing but the way of living. For example, every day we may belong to any religion, but we have a human personality, we are the human beings. We should know how to behave, how to respect others, how to behave with others. So these are the main specific things which are related or depicted in Dhamma. And Dhamma were the main principles of teachings of Buddha. Okay, so he propagated that Dhamma, and he appointed Dhamma Mahamattas, the officers, for the propagation and popularity of the teachings of Lord Buddha. So Dhamma Mahamattas were appointed, and the messages of the teachings of this Dhamma were inscribed on the stones and stone pillars and rocks. Okay, here is the beautiful image of the stone pillar, stone rocks. Okay, here is a stone pillar which you all are aware of. Here you can say Dhamma Chakra, which is also said as Ashoka Chakra, but remember it is Dhamma Chakra also. And here you can see this stone and the rock inscriptions. I was I would like to say I was really fortunate that last summer vacation I could visit this particular place. It's in Gujarat, and Girnar inscriptions. And these now it is protected, but remember, otherwise many regions these inscriptions are not known. People are not knowing what is written over there, so it is just lying sometimes just in open areas. But now these things are protected by ASI, that is Archaeological Survey of India, and this is a depiction of Girnar rock edicts. Here just imagine, one line by line they have inscribed the messages, okay, They have inscribed the messages, and these are inscribed where? On the rocks. That's why I say, when it becomes very difficult for us to write on the paper, write on the books, or write on the notebook, just imagine these were the scribes who were writing on the rocks. Okay, and obviously they had to write in such a way that there should not be any scribbling in between, because if they had to break a stone, obviously they could not take another one, such a big stone. Okay, so they had to be very much minute in writing, and a lot of care had to be taken. So this was done by scribes who were appointed by the kings to write on the rocks. So this is how Emperor Ashoka, he tried to pass on the messages to the people by writing on the rock surfaces as well as on the stone pillars. Here this it depicts like different major rock edicts and minor rock edicts which were issued by Ashoka. And remember, when we are talking about rock edicts, there were main very important 13 rock edicts of Ashoka, and these all 13 rock edicts, it highlights like how we should be benevolent to the society. He has given only such messages like how we should be, how we should behave with others as a human being, how we should treat others, like why we should not go on killing animals. So he was the one who propagated ahimsa. Okay, he did not favor himsa, but it is ahimsa, it is non-violence. So these concepts of non-violence, ahimsa, it comes from ancient period of time by the teachings of Buddha, by the teachings of Jaina, and later on Buddha's philosophy, which was also taken in consideration by the very famous personality, famous ruler, he was Ashoka. So he had issued all these edicts, giving messages to his people, to his subjects, the non-killing. Even he also had inscribed saying that okay, the trees also should be planted near the roadside. Just imagine, so considering and giving importance to nature, and that is what we are learning now. Obviously, we should take care of nature, no doubt, otherwise we know how nature takes care of us. So, it is rock edicts, wherein talking about ahimsa, the good messages of Dhamma, how to behave, how one human being should behave with others. So, here this depicts different major rock edicts, which are seen in the triangle form, highlighted with the red color. These are major rock edicts issued by Ashoka, okay, and minor rock edicts which are shown in the square form. Okay, these are minor rock edicts, and many regions, even famous was Maski rock edict. Okay, so these are the minor rock edicts issued by Ashoka. So see, just imagine the vastness of the empire. That's why he was, no doubt, that's why Ashoka was called as a great emperor of the ancient period of time. And the circular shape, it's depicts pillar inscriptions. So rock edicts and pillar inscriptions, these are different places wherein he had put these pillar inscriptions and the rock edicts. These edicts were found in such different variety of the places, various places. So as I have said earlier, that Dhamma, remember when we say Dhamma, as I have almost told you what is Dhamma, Dhamma was a state religious policy of Emperor Ashoka. Now why do we have to learn about Dhamma? Because Ashoka himself had taken that as a state religious policy. Okay, so what is actual meaning of Dhamma? Dhamma includes respect towards elders, generosity towards Brahmins and those who renounced worldly life. So we have to respect others, respect everyone. Respect for the religion, not only religion of our own, but respecting religion of everyone. So respect for religion, tradition other than one's own. Dhamma was a principle used by Ashoka to uphold his empire together. And here you can see this Dhamma wheel. Okay, this is called Dhamma wheel, and also now known as Ashokan wheel if you see that Ashokan pillar. Okay. So this is what is the meaning of Dhamma. Next question deals with the divine kingship theory. Say when we are referring to Mauryan rulers, at the same period of time in 6th century BC, there were different other rulers also who had ruled over India. For example, Kushanas. Even in southern parts, there were famous rulers were Satavahanas. Then even down, deep down if you come, then Cheras, Cholas, Pandyas. but even Satavahanas, Rashtrakutas, but the most famous who were also at that period of time when this Mauryan dynasty was at a glory, that was Kushana rulers. And Kushana rulers, you know, the very famous ruler was Kanishka, and these Kushanas were much more highlighted in this particular lesson because of their the divine kingship theory or the kingship theory which they had taken. So we will discuss in detail what was the kingship theory of Kushanas. One of the means of claiming high status was to identify with the variety of deities. Kushanas considered themselves God and adopted the title Devaputra, the son of God. This is very important for you all. Remember, who were the one who had adopted the title Devaputra? As I have said, Ashoka was given title as Devanampriya. Okay, Piyadasi. Similarly, Kushana rulers had adopted title, and what was the title? It was son of God, that is Devaputra. The kingship theory was best used by the Kushanas, and it's evident from their coins and sculpture. So how do we come to know that they had used this divine kingship theory with the coins? Because even it is said that one side they used to show, king's face was depicted on the coin because it was punch mark coin. Their face was depicted on side of the coin, or the images were depicted. Even the main title was depicted on the coins. And other side, even there was a idol of these different god and goddesses. Okay, so this indicated they had also taken the title of divine kingship theory. So they were relating themselves with the god. Even as it is said, son of God, Devaputra means what? Yes, these are the kings who are sent on earth by whom? By God, to rule over the people. So looking at this title, Devaputra, people gave them much more importance. People were benevolent to them. People respected them and accepted all their rules and regulations. Why? Even looking at this title called as Devaputra. So the kingship theory was best used, and as I have said, it was also depicted in form of the coins as well as in the sculpture. Next is statues of Kushana rulers have been found installed in the shrine at Mat near Mathura, and Mathura is in present day UP. Okay, so these shrines, these idols which were actually of the kings, and these kings' idols, these statues are also seen in the temples. So what it means? They were worshipping these kings. So Kushana kings the idols were also worshipped. There were the different shrines at Mat near Mathura as well as in Afghanistan. Okay, now we say okay, it is a different country, but remember that was also part of this Indian subcontinent. Okay, I hope this Devaputra, you have to remember this Devaputra, that is a title which was taken by Kushana rulers. Next is, how is the history of Gupta rulers reconstructed? When we have seen earlier the history of Mauryan rulers, don't get confused, Mauryan rulers, the very famous rulers were Chandragupta Maurya as well as Ashoka, and here we are dealing with the Gupta rulers. So even this 6th century BC to 600 CE, even these two dynasties, Maurya and Gupta, obviously these two dynasties had taken India and Indian region and Indian subcontinent to a great glory. How is the history of Gupta rulers reconstructed? History of the Gupta rulers is reconstructed from the literature, from the coins and from the inscriptions. I have told you what are the inscriptions, inscribed on the stones, inscribed on the maybe on the metal, okay, inscriptions on the metal, maybe on the copper. So literature, coins and inscriptions. So referring to literature, coins and inscriptions, we get lot of information about the Gupta rulers. So these are the primary sources, their own literature. For example, prashastis, which will come to it, coins and inscriptions. Prashastis, when I said this word prashastis, remember prashastis were composed in the praise of kings by the poets. So these kings were appointing poets to write about them. Okay, so these poets were writing about the kings. Prashastis were composed in the praise of kings, and these prashastis were composed by whom? It was composed by the poets. So these poets were appointed in the court of the kings, and these poets were writing about the particular king. Okay, that is what is called as prashastis, means prashansa, prashasti. And these prashastis were basically written in Sanskrit language. Historian draws factual information from such composition. Now see, these historians now they had to draw the factual information, like as poet is appointed in the court of king, obviously the poet would write something good of the king always, no doubt. But historians, when they are taking these processes into consideration to learn more in depth, okay, so these historians have to see and take only the important elements from it. They could not take everything. So what they did, they draw factual information. So what are the facts given in this Prashastis? That factual information is taken by the historians, and from such composition, okay. So historians draws factual information from such composition. Which composition? Prashastis. What are Prashastis? Written in the praise of kings. By whom it was written? By the poets. Prayaga Prashasti, very important to learn. It is Prayaga Prashasti, also called as Allahabad pillar inscription, which was written by Harisena. And this gives a detailed information about a very famous ruler of this Gupta dynasty. He was Samudragupta. You must have heard and learnt about him. He was a Samudragupta who had issued very different type of coins, basically gold coins. He was a lover of music, and no doubt even he had taken Indian history to the glorious point at that period of time. He was Samudragupta. So Prayag Prashasti, Allahabad pillar inscription, was composed in Sanskrit by Harisena, the court poet of Samudragupta, the most powerful Gupta ruler in the 4th century CE. And here you can see few coins, okay, gold coins issued by Gupta dynasty, okay. And here you can see a pillar, a stone pillar. Remember, here they have highlighted this part is highlighted over here, and this is what is the inscriptions on that pillar, okay. So this inscription, just imagine these epigraphists, these archaeologists, basically epigraphists, they have to read in detail like what was written on that. So they had to know that language. As I've said, James Prinsep, he could decipher Brahmi and Kharoshthi script. So they had to learn that script which we may not be aware of. So they did it and they deciphered the meaning, what was written. No doubt Prayag Prashasti was in Sanskrit. And when this information is given about the coins, remember ancient coins and information related to the coins, it is given by the Department of Numismatics, okay. And those who are the scholars, they are the numismatists who study the coins, and they are the one who learn more what are the dynasties mentioned over there, whose image it is, okay. That is about this is how the history of the Gupta rulers is reconstructed. Okay, what were the different strategies used to increase agricultural production in 6th century BC? Now, when we are talking about 6th century BC, from 6th century BC till 600 CE. So, shift to agriculture, plough agriculture, irrigation through wells and tanks. So, this is one very important point which gave rise to the agricultural production. Even some points we have seen earlier. The spread of agriculture in fertile alluvial river valley such as those of Ganga and Kaveri. Iron tip ploughshare, because as iron was available in abundance, they made use of this iron to prepare tools for agricultural activities as well as tools or the weapons for the military activities. So, iron tip ploughshare here in this case was used to till the alluvial soil in the areas which had high rainfall. In the parts of Ganga valley, production of paddy increased with the introduction of transplantation. So, I will say okay, they were just taking from one region, then again they were planting in a different the region which was alluvial fertile soil. So, this is how they did and they continued with the agricultural activities, and that is how they prospered. And no doubt even taxes were imposed on agricultural product, this produce, even on the trade, and this is how they have increased with the different strategies. Next question is, examine the rural society in 6th century BC in India, 6th century to 6th century BC to 6th century CE. There is a reference to agricultural labours. Small peasants as well as large landholders were seen in the rural areas. Even there was a reference to Gahapati, and Gahapati was a term used in Pali text to designate landlord. The large landholders and the village headmen emerged as powerful figures and exercised control over other cultivators. So, remember in this question, as I have highlighted in this particular points, Gahapati, remember Gahapati was what? It is a Pali term. As I said, Pali, Prakrit, these are the ancient languages okay, and their scripts were Brahmi, Kharoshthi. So in this Pali term, Pali text, they have several times they have found this reference to this word called as Gahapati, and Gahapati, according to the scholars, it means the landlords. Okay, as in previous slide we have seen that Gahapati was a landlord. No doubt Gahapati is also referred in different context. Like Gahapati was also the owner, master or the head of the household, who exercised control over the women, children, slaves and workers who shared a common residence. He was also the owner of resources, land, animals and other things that belonged to the household. Sometimes the term was used as a marker of status for a man belonging to the urban elite, including wealthy merchants. Okay, so this is what the term Gahapati means. So it is not only referred as a landlord, but it is referred as in a different context, as a head of the family, okay, head of the resources, owner of the resources. Explain the policy of land grants. And while dealing with the policy of land grants, remember here, we are referring to a very famous queen. She was Prabhavati Gupta. Some of the inscriptions were on stone and copper plates written in Sanskrit. The grants, that is land donations, were made to the religious institutions and to the Brahmins. Religious institutions, here we can say temples, and even the lands were donated to Brahmins. Only lady to grant land was Prabhavati Gupta, the daughter of Chandragupta II, who was then married to Vakataka family. And here she is an exceptional case, because in ancient period of time we will say, okay, there was no much status for the women and there is no much reference to the women and their position. But remember, here we have an exceptional case wherein Prabhavati Gupta, she was a queen, and her name, and in the copper plates it is referred that she was the one who donated lands, who gave land grants. Land grants was a part of a strategy adopted by the ruling lineage to extend agriculture to the new area. So why lands were granted? Why lands were donated? One, we have seen the lands were donated so that they could build a religious institution. Okay? And other reason why lands were donated, obviously for the expansion of agriculture, so that once the land is donated, people could begin with the agricultural activities in those particular regions. Lands were indicative of weakening political power as kings were losing control over Samantas. So no doubt agricultural lands or the donation of lands was good for the expansion of agriculture, for the expansion of empire, no doubt. But also remember, these land grants which was given, also there were the Samantas, and these Samantas were the one who were the you can say local chieftains. So when these lands were donated to them, they became much more powerful, and local chieftains who were serving earlier kings in a time of warfare, these Samantas themselves started becoming much more powerful, and sometimes kings is to find that yes, they were also the rivalries to the king, who Samantas. That is what the Samantas means. Samantas were the local chieftains who used to live on the local resources. Land grants provide some insight into the relationship between the cultivators and the state. So these land grants gives an information about the relationship between the cultivators and the state. Here down you can see the image of copper plates. Okay, such type of copper plates, not only inscription was seen on the or written on the stones, but also remember inscription was also written on the copper plates. So such type of copper plates are found belonging to the ancient period of time, which indicate like they have inscribed, written who had granted land, to whom the land was granted, and many more information is revealed also with such copper plates. Okay, so this is about the policy of land grants, that is donation of land. An exceptional case which I have told you, that is about Prabhavati Gupta, Queen Prabhavati Gupta. Examine the urban society of Mahajanapadas. So how was the urban society of Mahajanapadas? Kings and ruling elite lived in the fortified areas, which I have also earlier informed to you also. Mahajanapadas, it was fortified, it was walled. Okay, it was walled, and different Mahajanapadas had to wall because others had they were avoiding so that others should not attack them. Okay, they don't wanted any other Mahajanapadas to attack these Mahajanapadas. That's why it was walled. So the kings and ruling elites, they lived in the fortified cities. They protected themselves. Fine pottery, bowls, dishes with a glossy finish known as a northern black polished ware was used by the rich people, and they were living in that particular region of urban region. Ornaments, tools, weapons, vessels, figurines made up of wide range of materials such as gold, silver, copper, bronze, ivory, glass, shell and terracotta. Terracotta is a clay. Ivory, you know, that's elephant ivory. Okay. So these things were the items made up of ivories were also found in these regions of urban society, urban regions of Mahajanapadas. Inscriptions refer to the people including washing folk. Now who were the other people who were living in this urban area? They were the washing folk, weavers, scribes, carpenters, potters, goldsmiths, blacksmiths, officials, religious teachers, merchants and the kings. All these they were residing in this Mahajanapada and the urban regions of Mahajanapadas. Guilds and Shrenis. Now this is very important concept, very important term, guilds or Shrenis. Now who are the guilds? What is the meaning of guilds and Shrenis? Guilds and Shrenis was an association of traders and merchants. It was an organization, association of whom? It was association of traders and merchants. So these merchants and traders, obviously they were the one who were managing this trading activities in Mahajanapadas. And they procured, in a sense guilds and Shrenis, they procured raw material, regulated production and marketed the finished products. And because of even this guilds and Shrenis, no doubt, trade flourished during 6th century BC to 600 CE in India. The development of trade in the subcontinent and beyond, that is what is the next question. So how trade developed? The trade developed through the land and river routes. As I have said, Ganga and its tributaries also provided a best means of route, best means of trade route. Okay? So trade developed through the land and river routes. It extended over land into the Central Asia and beyond. So not only that in Indian subcontinent itself it was having that trade links, but remember even they were having the trade links with the Roman Empire too. Trade extended across the Arabian Sea to the east and North Africa and West Asia and through the Bay of Bengal to Southeast Asia and China. Okay, so even from this region, Bay of Bengal and all, Arabian Sea, they were trading to the different regions. Travelers travelled on foot and with the caravans of bullock carts and pack of animals. Salt, grain, cloth, timber, medicinal plants, etc. was transported. Spices, especially pepper, were in high demand in the Roman Empire. As I have said, Roman Empire also had trade links with ancient Indian subcontinent, remember, and that is how can we make out that they had trade links, because hordes of Roman coins are also found in Indian region. Okay. So spices were in much more demand in the Roman Empire. Textile and medicinal plants were transported across the Arabian Sea to the Mediterranean. Guilds, and again here there is reference to the Shrenis, which helped in development of the trade in 6th century BCE. Examine the monetary system in Mahajanapadas. This information related to the monetary system about the coins that is given by the detailed study of the numismatics. Okay? And punchmark coins. So first point, punchmark coins made up of silver and copper were the earliest to be minted and used. Now what is punchmark? Wherein the marks are seen on the coins, that is punchmark coins. So what type of coins were there? Silver as well as copper. It was minted and it was used. Symbols on punchmark coins with specific ruling dynasties including Mauryas suggest that it were issued by the kings. So looking at the image of the king which is marked on that coin, we can say okay, it was issued by the kings. The first coins to bear the names and the images of the rulers were the first coins, remember, we are talking about first coins to bear the names and images of rulers, and who had issued that? It was issued by the Indo-Greeks, who established control over the northern western part of the subcontinent in 2nd century BCE. So first people to issue to bear the names and images of the rulers, they were the Indo-Greeks. The first gold coins were issued in the 1st century CE by Kushanas. As we have seen in previous slide, related refer to the Kushana rulers. So even remember, these Kushana rulers had issued gold coins in India. And here you can see some such images of the coins. Okay, it's called a punch mark coins because markings are seen on these coins. So different metal, gold. Okay, these coins were identical in weights with the coins of Roman emperors and the Parthian and the rulers of Iran. Some of the most spectacular gold coins were issued by the Gupta rulers. So the most important gold coins are the spectacular coins. Who had issued it? Basically they were the Guptas, and basically it was gold coins. Hoards of common Roman coins have been found from the archaeological sites in South India. Copper coins were issued by the tribal republics of Yodhayas of Punjab and Haryana. Very important, remember, it is not only the kings who are issuing coins, but here we get reference even to the tribal people, tribal republics. Okay, tribal republic, and which was the tribal republic who had issued coins in India, and those were the tribal republics from Punjab and Haryana region. Those were the Yodhayas. So even Yodhayas as a tribal republics had issued coins in India. So there is also reference to the merchants and bankers and towns and the people, townspeople who had also issued coins. So this is a very important topic related to coinage or the financial system, or how the monetary system was seen in 6th century BC to 600 CE in India. Variety of the coins you have to remember. This next one, next question. Okay, here is a limitation. Now when we are coming to almost to the end of the topic, like what are the limitations of the inscription evidence? When we are talking about Prayaga Prashasti, when you are talking about rock edicts, 13 major main rock edicts of Ashok, then even the pillar edicts, pillar inscription, Junagadh rock inscription, then even the Girna rock inscription, and several such Maski and many such rock inscriptions. When we are talking about those things, remember what are the limitations of this inscriptional evidence. When these epigraphics are learning about all these things, they find a lot of problem. Why and what is the main problem? Because these rock edicts and rock pillars were just lying in a climatics. These pillars, these stones have witnessed different varieties, different type of climate. Okay, and as it is lying open, obviously these letters have been deteriorated. Okay, so you cannot see all the letters. Some letters are missing. So some missing letters is a kind of a limitation. So when these epigraphies are learning like what is inscribed on these inscriptions, so they cannot get the real meaning of this inscription, because why? Missing letters. Then even sometimes the letters are not clear, so unclear letters. Even certain things are not mentioned. When we are saying certain things are not mentioned, remember, only the messages which were issued by these kings to the people, to the subjects, these things were seen in those rock edicts. But much information is not given about the farmers, the artisans, that society. So we can say that certain things is not mentioned on these rock edicts, and it is not properly deciphered. Deciphered in the sense one has to give the real meaning, okay, actual meaning of this, what is written on that inscription. So it is not properly deciphered. One has to know what is the meaning which is revealed or which is hidden in this particular inscription. So one has to know the script very well. That is Brahmi and Kharoshthi, which I said were the main ancient scripts, and through which we get information about Mauryan dynasty, about Gupta dynasty, about the different dynasties and the different rulers who had ruled over India in 6th century BC. Okay, so to conclude this lesson, remember you to remember these 16 Mahajanapadas. Without these Mahajanapadas, obviously Indian history would have not been glorious. And remember the very powerful Mahajanapada, that is Magad. Even we have seen how it became powerful, how it was ruled, which are the committees which became very powerful, okay, how these committees were doing their duties very well. So these committees, 6 committees, sub-committees, Mahajanapada, and even how these were fortified, this issuing of coins, the stone inscriptions, rule of Mauryans, rule of Gupta dynasty, very powerful rulers like Ashoka, and other rulers too. Even Samudragupta, as we have mentioned in the Gupta rulers and Gupta dynasty. So these rulers, these Mahajanapadas, issuing of coins, then issue of different variety of coins made of different type of metal, stone inscriptions, pillars, then religion, all these this has contributed for the upliftment of the society, and that is how we can see the glory of ancient India from 600 BCE to 600 CE. So, also find out much more in details about this particular Mahajanapadas and revealing history of these Mahajanapadas.
Prudent Scholars, powered by Lupin Pharmaceuticals.